the floor to everyone. Now we are switching to this important part. So when people speak not in legal terms, the presentations are much brighter, but the lawyers are trying to present it in legal terms. So we would appreciate your comments on how do you believe, how important are all the ideas, how much are they implemented, whether this will be operating technically, whether that really meets their interests. Because what is in the draft, that is what we will live with. It is a very important principle not to harm. So I open the discussion, and the first one is Oleksandr from Danchenko Resource State Company. The subsidiary is a beloved one. I am Tertichny Oleg. I am the director of Danchenko Resource. That is the company which has to be the pioneer in information field, in information security issues, but we work on these things. The main resource of our company is, I cannot even say that that's the system. This is the system of electronic interaction between the governmental bodies. What is the system? The system is like a cloud which provides services of transferring e-documents between governmental bodies. We believe this should include not just governmental bodies, but other legal and physical legal entities and physical persons who would like to communicate with the authorities via information system. It's a good idea to organize that via cloud technologies. The cloud technologies are here, and that's the step forward. And that will allow to develop both the public sector and commercial sector in IT sphere. We are for that, but there are some deficiencies, there are things to work on, and that is why we are here. Everyone who will express the idea, you will put all these ideas together, and we will develop the draft that will suit everyone. Thank you. There's a request. If you could specify what are your comments to the draft. It will be important for drafters. The next one, Arturis Magilov. I would like to say that we are very much interested in ensuring information protection. Basically, I will talk about some of the cases related to the work of the state company, and from practice I will move to some normative issues, regulatory issues. Working in the state company, I witnessed the situation that in the beginning of 2000 we created a certain infrastructure. There were servers, there were some systems of monitoring there. One of them was the system of monitoring of the channels of communication, which allowed us to see how the channel is designed. And then the equipment of Cisco company was used, and the system of but the system of monitoring of the servers and services was there, and every one of these systems had a separate hardware, separate service in the end of 2010, we had to replace the equipment, and we started thinking about how to modernize the structure. We looked at it with the engineers, and we started actively developing cloud technologies, and we moved in the direction of private cloud. So we moved the system of monitoring, administering of primary networks, IP networks, virtual servers were moved on monitoring servers and services to these clouds. Instead of 3 physical servers, we have 1 physical server where we had 3 virtual. In some time, we started thinking about how we'll be making reserve copies, and we started creating cluster system from virtual servers. Then there was another issue, but what if our data center is flooded by water? Basically, the territorially distant data center, building that with the purchase of diesel generators and other things, that means a lot of money. We started looking at cloud providers. We were looking at Nova because they were territorially, they were located on the territory of Ukraine. But for certain, to satisfy the norms and regulations on information protection, we started looking if there is a solution in the Ukrainian market. We saw there is a solution in the Ukrainian market which allows to decode the Ukrainian channels of communication using Ukrainian cryptography. Then we looked at how we'll be able to store data. We saw that Ukrainian developers have the solution which allows to do that with the help of the system of database. Then we can do it on a virtual machines using the logical disks of servers. And the latest solution, it's mixed up cloud solution. It's private with public provider. We have not done that because of different difficulties. So why I am saying that? When you do not have any resource, but you have to implement some task, the cloud can provide solution to the tasks, and cloud provider can do that, and there are solutions which allow to secure the information which is processed in the system. As to the comprehensive system of information protection, there's a stereotype that the comprehensive system of information protection is when we close everything, one port is open and we live in it. In fact, it's not so. The idea of the system is to build it in such a way that it works 24/7 and so that it gets modernized. The main task is to use the mechanism of information protection which are needed for your particular system and describe that for other engineers which will maintain the system after you leave this job. Other people will come, and one of the ways is the design documentation which describes it. As to use of cloud solutions in governmental sector, first of all, we need to look at the information which is to be processed. If this is public information which is placed on the website of some state institution or company, then it means that it's publicly accessible, people can read it. Then what's the difference? Where is it located? In the server which is in some premises or in the cloud? and there are information systems which require special protection, and there are special requirements to these systems. The center of certification of keys, the equipment is to be placed in screened rooms or boards, and from the practice looking at the requirements of the European Union, I saw that one of the Polish centers of certification of keys also puts equipment in the screened room. That's not the know-how of Ukraine. That is the just practices, best practices. That's all I wanted to share. The future is with the clouds. Thank you.
Next speaker, who actually would like to take part in this discussion, is Danchenko, head of the government agency. Good afternoon, esteemed participants in the round table, esteemed speakers. I believe that what has been done by Denis Gurskyi, that here in the audience there are opponents of using the cloud technology. This is not true. Maybe those who have some claims towards the draft law. I can talk about myself. As a natural person, I've been using the cloud technologies for a long time now. As the head of the self-government body, also this kind of government cloud for the self-government, and also integration with certain cloud technologies, the use of cloud technologies by these public bodies, and first of all, those which do not cost too much and they are allowed to organize the collective work. And that is, speaking in principle, in a case, they have to be qualitatively legalized. Of course, the presentation of this draft law, we have to supplement it with many things. We have to determine the respective agency or body who is going to take care of development of drawing up of standards and the requirements to the providers, as was shown on the slide. This is very important, but at the same time I would like to bring this discussion into a different, in a different channel. I can see present here reps of many state power authorities bodies, and it would be interesting to hear, first of all, if there is a possibility to use it. I believe that today the possibility to use the cloud technologies exists. Why they are not used? In my turn, I can raise the issue or the problem, which is really very topical for our bodies, the systemic nature of financial funding. Today we have a lot of information systems. I can say, well, some of them are created based on the principle of cloud technologies, and their owners are different public bodies. It's not just one information system. I can at least name here 4 of those. And their support or their upkeep costs as compared to the cloud technologies absolutely not a big sum of money, but the state doesn't have the money even to support those systems. Moreover, the prosperity of people depend very much on those systems. If you're talking, for example, about the register who would like to improve their living conditions or some other systems, so I would like to speak about another aspect of this problem. Today we have some kind of conservative systems or administrators who believe in their separate or individual servers and do not say the benefits of the basket or the pool of those servers. The number of those people are not big, but if you're going to have more administrators and directors, they are concerned about different things. If they rely 100% on the cloud technologies, but tomorrow they will not have not only money to pay for the power supply, but also for the rental payment will be impossible for them to effect, and they will have to close their facilities. And there are many of those who have their own servers and backups in the cloud technologies. But again, I address to you as the developer, maybe by introducing some changes, we can provide for something of stability of finance on the one hand, and on the other hand, responsibility of those who are service providers. Well, we can give the examples like providing the telephone communication or power supply. For the first time, they have and say and warn us that we are going to disconnect you and stop providing you with the services. Half a year this lasts, normal for half a year, then the next half a year the situation changes for the worse and again for the better, whatever. But in our legislation there is a special line dedicated to the payment for the energy carriers, the same, and this is the same service provided if we're talking about the cloud technologies. This can be a telephony or the power supply service, whatever. So I would like to turn discussion to this sphere, and I would like to hear the opinion of the opponents of cloud technologies. Then, thank you. Before we proceed, I would like to know that every time when we are talking about introduction of cloud technologies, we say that we are providing new possibility or new opportunity. It's not the obligation, it's not a must. And our transition is through the expansion of the possibilities, not via administration. Everybody, it's a must for everybody, and only in this direction, only there, etc. Whatever we propose can be realistically realized. Those who provide this service, those who actually consume that service, and those who are interested in the preservation of keeping this information. Next speaker. Yeah, are you going to say a few words? Okay. I have to apologize. The matter is, I have a number of the public meetings today, which actually I had to leave half an hour ago, but it was interesting to me to listen to some of the comments. Maria Gornostai is going to stay behind and she will collect all your opinions. The most important, what I would like to say, the draft law does not oblige anybody to use, by all means, the cloud technology. It creates the possibility to use them. It simplifies a lot of things which today, for some reason, are restricted or limited, and the system administrators and public and civil servants actually bear responsibility for what is being introduced today. And in some cases, people believe that it's better not to do something than to do something. You know, as a rule, the innovations never appear in the states, the public structures, and I really wish that the situation changes. As for the electronic petitions, I can explain to you when we are talking about the electronic petitions. I just imagine that there is a possibility when the 1 million, the minute it appears and becomes reality, 1 million of users would like to enter this service, you can understand the size of the infrastructure, which has to provide the protection against denial of service, etc. This is a very serious issue. As a rule, the organizations which are dealing with that professionally, they resolve those issues much better. Because realistically, for example, when we're polling or collect the data, the state will require this resource for 2 weeks, for a week or 2 weeks, and then it will not require it any longer. And the cloud technologies can resolve this problem. For example, you buy this package of paper, you use it, and that's it. Or whenever you switch off the light during the night hours, you know, then you do not use that. But information resource can be used all the time. And here we have this service which can be provided whenever the state needs it, or it's required for the implementation of fulfilling this or that task. To develop websites or to analyze the data. It can be used much more efficiently. I'm talking about the information resource. It suffices to look at the infrastructure of the Central Election Committee. You can see the history of procurement of purchases. How often I use the service of the Central Election Committee? Once every 4 or 5 years. Well, we immediately spotted the opponent or the member of the Central Election Committee. This is just an example. And today in those infrastructure, you know, I would like to emphasize that the most important is that the draft law makes it possible for the public bodies, those which wish to do that, to use the information resources which are provided either by the Ukrainian or international providers of cloud technologies. Thanks a lot. I wish you every success in your next meetings, and we do hope that we are going to continue to no less actively discuss this draft law again. I'm going through the list of those who registered in the official, along the official lines, and Dream Michal, New Ukraine. Maybe I need 5 minutes. I'm not going to abuse your time. I can say a lot of people who we meet at different meetings, and we discuss a lot of things. What I like that actually you define the notional system. Actually, this process lasted for 1 year until we reached some. And as of today, the public bodies use that. The question is whether it is now sitting now. Today's situation, I'm working the concept of rehabilitation, and as for today, officially registered participant of ITO are 1,900 something persons who are officially registered. Part of them needs rehabilitation. IPDs, we have quite a lot, according to the data provided to us last week by the Minister of Social Policy. Again, IPDs from the Crimea, they cannot be issued any documents in our country. They have to send the official letters to the Crimea, and then they send by international mail. Excuse me, this is part of Ukraine. At the level of the National Security and Defense Council, they declared that some of the documents which are actually of state secret were seized or confiscated from or taken away from Donetsk region. Do you know that we do not have the single medical card on the level of the national level? Each regional physician has his own register. When we asked to give us the register of the victims of those who suffered, and he was sent a 600 something pages set of documents. How can we work with this kind of information? Recently we passed the law on the personal data, which actually encumbered a lot of different things. I was participating in Maidan, and I also had to pay attention to that. We have a lot of questions which should be brought to the national discussion. It was never the case. On the one hand, it protects the person, but it protects the person from those services which can be provided or can be provided to them. In parallel to this roundtable, we have the conference in the House of Officers, and some issues also are raised or touched upon, that people remain uninformed. And accordingly, they cannot be entered into respective register. They cannot be given any medical or other support or assistance. If we had the register, we could clearly see that there are people who really require this assistance or help, and when and how this help was provided to this specific people. We can use cloud technologies and additions and applications, but we have to do something about that. And according to all the public services, this will be very topical for all of those. Maybe we could make another step forward and not to think what was the situation or like behind for 10 or 20 years as compared to any other country.
Talking about protection of personal data, a few words. I believe whatever's happening after the law was passed is caused because the governmental authorities are not using certified services of the providers of cloud technologies. If they were using, they wouldn't be thinking about protection of the information database. But now they will be in a hurry, and they will be doing that, delegate this service to professional company. That is what needs to be done. I forgot to tell about that. Don't look at the cloud technologies as at a technology or fashion. First of all, that's the change of financial behavior. That's a economic phenomenon. They take the commitment, they provide service, and they're responsible for that. They make business on that, and that's super. We have so many gaps. I consult many projects.
Спасибо большое.
I would like to give the floor to Igor Trigubenko. It's related to the experience of Estonia on use of clouds in the public sector. Thank you. Igor Trigubenko, Microsoft Ukraine. I'm responsible for cloud technologies in the segment of small and medium-sized business. The main thing I heard today is that this draft will open the door to all cloud providers, both national and global, to address the problems that we have. And the main thing is, thanks to colleagues, Dmitry has stolen part of my speech. First, the thing is, it's economic model. When the system is not needed, you should stop using it. Today, our digital world is changing so fast that the system of modification and legislation physically cannot correspond to what's happening in the world. And the second thing is that the cloud technology is like a bricks using which you can create any solution. Talking about Estonia, there was a big group set up which examines all the specific features of use of information, and part of the information which is public, the presidential website was on the cloud, part of the information is on LED and traditional data centers, but as a hybrid between the land and cloud, this data embassy, they put all the archives of the system in the cloud. The system works on land, but if there is a problem, they can get the data from the cloud. It doesn't work in the cloud, but the cloud stores the archive. And these elements, where you need the privacy, that is the unique thing. We need to use it, to do it. This should help us all. Thank you. Because in the banking sector, where there is some specific attitude to banking secret, but the banks were the first ones who were starting using cloud. Dmitry Dubilet, thank you. I will be brief. I'm talking to you as the IT director of Privatbank, the person who writes an invoice to Amazon, to pay Amazon, which is $1 million. I don't know whether there are representatives of National Bank here or not, but we are using cloud technologies. I will not talk about all the advantages. We do have a hybrid model, but I can give you one example. A year ago, when the conflict started with Russia, our bank has become one of the structures which Russians were attacking actively. They were attacking via DDoS attacks, and that's when we had to act creatively, and we moved many of our capacities to Amazon. We lacked the capacity to counteract the attacks of Russians. The data did not suffer, but they were trying to fill in the channels. When we came to Amazon, we allowed access to unlimited resources of Amazon. We have a lot of Amazon now, and we received an access to the experts of Amazon, and they were helping us to counteract the attacks. That is one thing about why and how access to large infrastructure helps commercial organization which has enough IT resources and IT specialists to address some problems. You don't even imagine to what extent that is reliable. Now we have a person who was very serious looking at the draft. I would like to give the floor to Gleb Prokhorenko, who has comments to the draft. Thank you. I will just show some of the comments. I am Gleb. I am from the Association of Auditors of Information Systems, and we have many experts. If the authors of the law would like to analyze our comments, we can involve many more experts. The main thing is the draft is very important. It's like movement shift from copying the books by hand to the printing press. But I used the cloud technologies abroad and in many projects. The original business cases were not executed. We either went out, we failed to put into the cloud technologies some part of the services. First of all, as to cryptography, the confidentiality probably should not be protected, but the integrity of data, the fact that some people probably cannot deny that they are doing it. So here everything is based on risk. In some cases, this could be Ukrainian solution, but this is the critical remark about confidentiality and integrity. And all these tender proposals, the lots are to be written carefully. Responsibility in many projects, that is movement to the technology, to cloud technologies. When the project would fail, no one was responsible. But all these managers, they are to be responsible, and they should think about all these things, due diligence. First of all, the manager should think about what should be the security measures, what should be other controls, and then he should be applying them. And if it's proven that he hasn't done that, he should be responsible. What else needs to be done? You need to take into account the proposals. There are many more standards, and in the comments I just mentioned about some. I just mentioned the terms which any MP would understand. These are normal proposals. You need to take into account the risks from use of cloud technologies and to do some screening of the supplier, whether the supply is not related to criminals, to terrorism, to aggressors. So my big request is please take into account all these comments. Irina, do you have any comments?
We absolutely agree with this information as one of the most important three characteristics. It has to be protected for the open information as well, and we know that this is of much concern to many people who should appeal to this draft law. In this context, we would like to understand maybe there is some kind of possibility to regulate this maybe at the level of the resolution of the cabinet of ministers. And the issue exists. If you look at the development level development of cryptographic documentation. First of all, we have to go through the expertise of algorithm, and then through the expertise or examination of the protection of the software or the hardware, whatever it exists. And you said that can be used. We can use those means or algorithms which are recommended by the information protection system, or we can just use our electronic curves. In fact, we have only the National Bank who developed for themselves special rules, and they can use the RSA. But in fact, it so happens, if you're talking about the national standard, can we use it? Not RSA, not DSA, nor the DSA, nor the curve, because there is no recommendation code to use those, and they cannot be used today. So we thought maybe, we agree, definitely, that we have to protect that integrity and confidentiality, not for the open information. If we encrypt it, if it's kept in the cloud, then we cannot fulfill the principle of access to information. It will cease to be open. And the first requirement toward the open information, when it's being transferred from system to system, formally is being introduced only for the restricted access information, but the issue of integrity is really very important. What would be your attitude? Not that there is no requirement for the open information. Maybe it can be used if you're talking about more wide range of algorithms for that purpose. Well, in our comments, we already mentioned that the selection of the means for protection must be based on the risk. The risk is the probability of threat and the losses incurred during its implementation. If the risk is small, if we believe it, it can be justified based on the standards and providing the audit standards. And by the way, they are already translated free of charge by us into Ukrainian. We can then use, reasonably will be used, the market accessible means. Also in the world practice to use the audit and the system of control. Previously it was SAS, but for the financial statements, but now the SOC report type 2 or type 3, the most important is the fact that if we have a system, for example, it's installed in the basement, if we have the system control system, and we transfer it to the cloud, we can take care of one sub or two, based on some criteria which may there be a special resolution of cabinet. We ourselves will select this. All the controls levels which were used in our basement, maybe they will be efficient also in the cloud. But this does not take our responsibility for the safe, secure data, the integrity, etc., etc. For example, technology of carrying out such audit could be brought to the level of cabinet of ministers, but that such audits that there are must. This is the level of the draft law. We have to mention that. Thanks a lot. Elena Kononenko, Ukraine also wants to take part in this discussion or providing her comments, please. Well, I present here international company Intel Ukraine, which has been operating in Ukraine for more than 15 years now. And indeed, we have an experience of dealing with the cloud, working with international organizations and in many countries of the world. And cloud, first of all, is associated with internet. The things become intelligent, etc. And we live through the period of increasing the amount of information. You know only too well. Many speakers were talking about very interesting and correct things. Of course, we are prepared to support cloud using our resources, both local and international, to support and promote this work in Ukraine. Thanks a lot. Maxim Matskol Inforada, are you here in the audience? Well, the list of the official list is exhausted. Maxim Agiev denotes. I'm sorry, maybe I just missed somebody. Good afternoon. My name is Maxim Agiev, General Director of the Danova company. That kind of shooting team who kill everybody on approaching the cloud, you know. which actually concerned me, or let's say interested me in the speech of Dmytro Shymkiv. Not quite recently I read this kind of draft law, and I paid attention to the fact that the text proper of this document is a kind of permissible but not obliging or not mandatory. And there's a big mistake committed by the team which prepared this draft law. I'll explain why I believe so. It's obvious to everybody now that this topic number one, and for a long time from now on, that the implementation reforms is actually very heavy fight between the old and the new. And based on the heaps of different bitter criticism or wave criticism, which never subside but just increases in its power, and it's very important whether these public bodies have any motivation to transfer to new technologies, not even technology, I agree, but new organization. And this is a principal difference from public bodies, from private companies, which during the period of crisis have or are forced to survive, to fight for their life and defend themselves from some attacks, etc., etc., and they use any accessible means to do that, which are capable to protect their business. That was the interest of the owners and the personnel of the companies. In the state, honestly speaking, I cannot see that. And in case of permissible text, we'll find a million reasons why this specific minister cannot switch over to the cloud. I can guarantee you this has always been the case and will continue to be the case. I don't know whether it's possible to revisit this draft law. I suspect it's not possible now, but anyway, I deem it necessary to introduce a compromise word, priority to use the cloud technologies for open or public data regarding the procurement of some equipment or creating their own data centers. Otherwise, this will be for just a futile effort, and everybody will show us on TV. This I can say on behalf of the cloud operators in Ukraine. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And by the way, very interesting proposal, but I allow myself a very short comment regarding the priority. From point of view of strategy, I believe it's correct. From point of view of legislation, let's leave this question as an open one, because we need the priority for the priority. First of all, we have to develop those services to a certain extent in Ukraine in order to create artificial priorities for someone and to deprive this priority for the others. From the strategic point of view for digital Ukraine, this is very important. This is a priority direction, a trend, along the lines of which we have to move ahead. Well, I would like simply to echo your comment, or maybe to further elaborate on that. This is in the situation of the open data. There are several ministries which really very much wish to have the open the data. They have something to open, and they understand this is very beneficial, political, economical to them. I can suspect that the same situation will be for the cloud technologies. Two ministries' priority regime will launch their work in the cloud and see how it works. And the new budgetary year will come. It will be clear that those who work with the cloud, they spend 3 kopecks, and those who have in their investment 2 hectares of servers, they will spend somewhat more. Maybe then some managerial decisions will be taken. I can add to that rhetorics, permissible or obliging rhetorics, I believe that obliging will be the real reality. The objective reality will be an obliging factor, and actually it really means that the public agencies, ministries and departments, if you're talking about the funds available to them, 1 or more, 2 years more, and they won't have funds to renovate the fleet available, So the first objective reality, give us money and we can actually update what we have. But what about the cloud technologies? Please read about those. I understand this will be a hard task. Point number 1, priority is maybe not a very interesting idea. Very interesting idea. I mean, we have to take care of that and take this into account. It must be priority, but the objective reality will force IT management to think a bit different, in a bit different way, how to preserve the economy factors or interest and how to reach the targets and objectives and interests of the organization. This is my opinion. And I understand the political component which is behind this draft law and such kind of strict formulations. We would be like to do that, but this draft law, there will be deputies, there will be ministers, how they make this Roquefort cheese. They take 10 kilograms of something, almost casein, which costs $5. They provide some kind of fungus, whatever, and then it gives us $10 price for this kilogram of cheese. So in our sub-legislative documents, we have to be more strict regarding legislation, but for going through the parliament and to achieve consolidation and instill this culture in the people, so non-regulation, but more corroboration or facilitation, I believe to be more optimal. This is my personal point of view. Better, to me, better such a law is nothing at all, or the law which would be excessively strict.
Вам слово.
Добрый день, меня зовут Михаил.
I'm Mikhail Sentsov, Krynytsa Charity Foundation. I'm a program man. I would like to add some negative. But first I will support cloud technologies. One of the processes there is unification, standardization, and here, if you want, you go to cloud. It does not suit me. I want my cabinet of ministers to work efficiently. So if you move to cloud, you need to go there with the purpose, because every computer is like your own house. So we need to create one whole system. It's a workplace and it should be there. It's about whether that's allowed or not. But I would like to draw attention to a different situation. The law says certificates, agreements, these are nice words, and the analysis of the risks of crisis. But I would like to remind you of one situation. In 1994, our country signed the agreement with the leaders of other countries on territorial integrity. Then certain events took place, and they say, well, we did sign it, but what we did not work it out. Okay, Ukraine, do you need any humanitarian assistance? And they send humanitarian assistance. So now, when it comes to open data that we want to place in the cloud, we need to understand cloud technologies of Microsoft could be on servers which are in Ukraine, but it can be owned by the Nova company. What's the problem? But today we see the situation that there is a hybrid war waged against us, and even the Nova company still could be sold. And if in this company there is the information, the state information, which ensures the operation of the whole state, I will buy the Nova company. And then there will be no, the Nova company, there will be no data. I want you to understand that I did not throw bombs, and I'm grateful that they have the servers in their premises, and our Ukrainian soldier is guarding them. I see many civil servants of different ministries who spend money from the budget for their own servers. Can't you create a national cloud data center? I believe we can create our own data center. We can ensure security of information, that we will not be worrying whether Amazon is our partner in 10 years or not. Because we are the state of Ukraine, we have many programmers, and we developed the global IT sector, and we say, let's give it to Amazon. I want you to understand all these risks. And you can just buy the Nova company today, but then they will say, oh, sorry, now open data. One more thing, I'll open data. When there is a database of legal entities, I look at some company, I was interested in some company, I looked at it. I don't have the access to the whole database, but I can invent the analysis of database, which will help me to understand what's happening in the country. And I cannot.
Поэтому я хочу, чтобы при развитии там,
I would like, when developing cloud technologies, we need to take it into account. And you can make special analysis of anything. But today we start working in the cloud, and then there's no cloud. We are all in Google Doc, we're used to it, but what happens if it disappears? Do you do backups of your Google Docs? If we back up Google Docs, we need to do it here. And that's again about creating our own data center. But to say that there's no money in the budget, well, we are building this wall between Russia and Ukraine, and we have no budget for construction of data center. Thank you for attention.
Комментарии на это.
Well, I understand that there are some comments regarding this input. Well, I believe comments, and we can continue discussion during the coffee break. Just briefly about the open data. It's open in the table. We have to know what to. Well, in my notes, I have to see what I have to say regarding the open data. In the law on open data, reads the data which are going to be repeatedly used. So it's good that you mentioned the registered legal entities, but so far it's not open. We're talking about the search. And when I can download X in Excel format or whatever else, then it means open data. And here, two persons before you were talking about the hybrid, or let's say using the cloud technology. I did not understand the risks you mentioned. Okay, maybe during discussion. I can talk you mentioned the bots could be, or let's say flop could be happen to anything with the cloud, which we can to duplicate everything or provide redundation everywhere, maybe not in the same place. That's why we'll have the possibility to do that if we follow the cloud way or cloud path. Why? Because once again I say this means saving of the funds or the money within the level, the national level. And those funds which can be saved could be used in order to build, among other things, the private structures and to reserve or to redundate the data which will be the de novo. They can be duplicated in Google or Amazon or elsewhere. So we are not talking about the wall against wall, you know. Why the wall? You know, the wall is a different situation. I even don't want to talk about that now. But the economy, will be there. Speaking about the international, I don't know. I did not feel. I don't know whether somebody had a feeling that we are talking about some kind of the already ready-made cloud of Microsoft to Google. No. Actually, I'm the competitor to Microsoft. I'm sitting here. There are some other brands who compete with each other. We are not talking about that. But I agree with you. If you are going about the internal clouds, meaning This is the market. I agree. This is the market. It means the experts, specialists, our local who are not going to flee from this country but stay here and work on that. We always have a possibility to go to Amazon, and if we can stay here, why not? So this again, the matter of using the money. You mentioned that we already purchased all the hectares of that, and we are talking to build one for several entities. This will mean saving the money. This my actual short comment. That was not in a contract but memorandum. That was the problem with that Budapest agreement. We would like to have the law which will not give the way to such problems. Any comments or issues? If do you have them, but very briefly. Taking into consideration we have the hybrid war, the cables were exploded. We had one antenna, one aerial. It's enough to undermine or to explode just one cable to put the end to everything. If you're talking about the security, you know, I'm sorry, representatives of the Central Election Committee. Well, you several times mentioned the Central Election Committee. First of all, I would like to say that you don't have to persuade us to use the cloud technologies, because we've been using the cloud technologies for 6 years now. The National Register of Electors is a cloud, and 600 our personnel come every day to work. They do not want to go home; just want to work, you know. What I would like to say, we are very much interested, with much interest with regard to this draft law. If we have the kind of possibility to use some kind of public clouds, definitely we are going to make use of those. Maybe to start with for backup, maybe then for online work, and we have the most modern servers. Who else have Spark T5 servers? We have those, maybe nobody else in Ukraine, and we work in using those. And Dmytro mentioned here why the Central Election Committee, those servers are idling. No, they're not idling. During the night hours, they calculate to compute the statistics. We have a lot of statistic data which we collect during the night hours. And I can argue with the presidential administration. Let's compare your servers and ours. By the way, the presidential administration is a way to provide the data about those who actually are granted citizenship or deprived of the citizenship. But we cannot provide this data in the electronic format, only in the paperwork. Well, at least the department which is responsible for that. It's impossible to agree with them to somehow to use the data in an electronic, secure way, you know. No input, sorry. Well, definitely we are not going to ask about that so far, but when the term will expire, the life term of those, or using those servers, because we understand this belongs to, the future belongs to that. We understand what happened when the situation with the Crimea, you know, how many departments lost this information, but we still have this information. We know everything about everybody, about the Crimean population, those electors who remained in Donetsk and Lugansk area. The Valeriy gave us a very good example, but we are sitting in this room, and we didn't feel comfortable until they switched on the air conditioner system. This is not a cloud technology, so sometimes there is a sense to use the cloud technology, but we must have the right to choose from.
And I would like to say that unfortunately there's no one from the State Committee on Communications. Everyone said that they're bad, technologies are bad, technologies of encryption, but I believe the future is there.
Да, пожалуйста, еще.
Evgeny Vladimirov. We are international cloud provider. We work in 17 countries. We develop platforms, applications, soft, but for this discussion, the most interesting is our experience in Belarus and Moldova, where we won tenders and we are building the state clouds there in Belarus. And the whole public sector will move to cloud, and they have introduced changes in the legislation.
Не работает. Даже
But it doesn't work. Even, well, you understand that there is a political will in Belarus which is strong, but there are thousand reasons why and how, why they should stay on land, not to move to the cloud. But there is one cloud with reserving, secured. In Moldova, the approach is different. We won the tender, the contracts are to be signed. We have experience, we know what we are talking about. I have several questions on the draft. The company in November made a decision to open rep office in Ukraine, to develop cloud in Ukraine, to provide resources for Ukraine, to provide services from Ukrainian base, from Ukrainian cloud. Because first of all, please answer the question. I am globalist. I use Google, Amazon, I love these services. But once we have so many IT specialists, we are among top 5, top 10.
за границу. Вот.
Why should we move it abroad? Especially when our country needs to enhance its competitiveness. Why don't we support Ukrainian producer? Why don't we support the Ukrainian cloud, the providers who will be providing services inside the country? I don't know how to compete with Google or Amazon, how to compete. I'm sorry, but the draft law, does it talk about moving abroad? Well, does it say so or not? It doesn't mention. So probably we need to mention not to move it, at least for some period of time, 3 years, 5 years. That's a proposal. We need to be able to compete with such monsters as Amazon and Google. That's from purely economic point of view. We will not have to think about that. You can move to Amazon. The second question. In case now Lvov administration puts its resources somewhere. In Ukraine doesn't have diplomatic relations with the country where the servers of the cloud are physically located, where all the data is. But Ukraine doesn't have diplomatic relations, but it signs agreement with the company. They put servers. Google puts it in the bottom of the ocean. It probably will not be important from the point of view of information security, but imagine what happens if it gets to the mass media. In the bottom of the ocean, and so what? Okay, Russian Federation, for example. Yes, we do work in Russian market. The provider of services, it's their responsibility where they keep it. I don't think that legally it's possible. This is something which could be described in the agreement. And what you said about market limitation, don't forget that we are members of WTO. We cannot, we shouldn't be violating the norms, only with all the exceptions of the agreements. We need to be very careful. There should be access to the market, because otherwise they will close the access for us. But how can we do that? We need to think about that. That is a proposal, so that this market doesn't die in Ukraine. And one more thing, it's more about when and how. You mentioned the standards. We understand how servers are bought, the tenders are organized, what the task, what the volume of servers they are bought. Then the controlling body come and ask, why did you buy so many servers? And people know how to answer this question. But in purchase of clouds, there's no such experience. So the question is how to fight corruption. The corruption is possible when you buy a cloud or when you buy a hardware. So the issue of standards. I'm sure when will the standards be developed? Every ministry, every civil servant has a certain function, certain resources are needed for this function. We have this in Belarus. That's huge data to understand what are the functions of every person. And for that person, we need to allocate resources, not more, not less. That's
упрощение тендера.
Second question, the amplification of the tender procedure. Cloud is on demand. If I need it, I take it. If not, not. I need the light, I switch on the light. If not, I turn it off. And I went to bed. So to buy the cloud, having passed through the whole tender procedure, do you plan anything? I understand regarding for the standards, this is a very interesting thing. What you mean by, if you're talking about the standards, Eugene, I remember a discussion, we are not talking about the technical standards now. The matter is that the officials and all the clerks officials can be subdivided in several audiences. For example, let's say the state or the public tax administration, there is an inspector or the other inspector. They need some kind of information, technical means, whatever. There are officials with other type of activities. Maybe for them or to them they need more resources or other resources, etc. So my answer, it's difficult to say when, but we have to raise these issues associated with the cloud, the virtual laptop, so to say. But it's not only, we are not talking only for the cloud to contain some data, but to provide some services like telephony, or virtual desktop. Why the inspector should buy a workstation which costs about $2,000 with super processor, super memory, if he realistically works only with two documents, Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. So the technology of the virtual desktop allows him to provide either the file or the thin client, or kind of monitor to that cloud, which allows him to save money. It would cost him not $2,000 but $100. I also like the comment, logic using this technology. Is it possible at least to ask? Is it possible to reach the vision of the operation of the work of the activities of the officials level, the heads of departments need this level? Maybe this will be will have sense, using the cloud services, taking into consideration time limitations. Maybe we have another time only for one comment. Maria, maybe will have, you have some comments or not? So please introduce yourself. Yuri Danchenko, the World Unit of Peacemakers. So I would like to give the greetings from UN Protection Cluster, who deals with the protection of natural persons. Motivation, always based on the commitments of the country, among other things. When we are talking about how to oblige this public body to do something, there is some UN rules and regulations before 2015, after 2015. If you take consideration of those regulations or objectives, there is also UN rules for financing. In this case, the country with a conflict, without the conflict, with money, without the money, they have to take those goals or objectives and request the General Secretary General or international structure to provide A, technical assistance, B, financial assistance, or any other service, including what pertains to the creation of public or non-public networks. So, speaking about the issue of those who suffered as a result of A2O, to return a target-oriented approach, we have an agreement, international agreement or treaty, UN Convention on prohibition of let's say the landmines use. And whatever would happen today. Today we have the people who suffered of violation of this convention. I don't know whether the state has or does not have the money, but under this convention, to which we are party to, we have to provide any kind of assistance away to this suffered or the victim of this. In United Nations, only 2 people process this information. The information must be provided in English in order to us to get the money for those victims. Somebody must be responsible for the collection of this kind of information in this country. Unfortunately, the coordinator is the Minister of Defense, but this work is actually responsible. This is the Minister of Social Policy and the State Committee for Emergency Situation. Okay, if we would like to get this assistance or aid, we have to switch over to the international standards. But to do that, we can ask some money, financial or some other kind of assistance. What I would like to say, that our structure is ready to provide the technical assistance to Ukraine, to its public structures, in order for us, after this meeting, could follow step by step in order to ensure that the people get or attain the much needed required assistance. Why do not they issue the certificates of participants until 150, whatever, 1500? Yeah, thanks for your attention. We are prepared and open to provide this assistance. Maria, do you have anything to say? At 6 we have to vacate this audience. And in the back room you have tea, coffee, rolls, whatever else. Thanks a lot. I have a brief comment. I will repeat myself. We are not talking about some kind of the obliging or the forced use of the cloud. And we are not talking about the public cloud now, our state level cloud, because we have to make certain steps by certain bodies, including the State Committee on the Communications, which unfortunately we don't have representatives. But we had the in-house meeting with the presidential administration, where we invited the Minister of Justice, the Agency of Electronic Self-Governance, and representatives of the State Committee of Communication and the Verkhovna Rada representative, who are going to work, special committee on this draft law further on. So we had this kind of discussion. Don't know why they are not present today. Definitely we are going to have a special meeting with them. Also we had some raised hands. So please help yourself to tea or coffee, since we do not have to have the coffee break as it is. So let's have such a kind of mode of our work, having tea or coffee and making participate in this discussion. Good afternoon, Central Election Committee, the Central Election of Central Register of Electors. There was a chance. I personally communicate with you, but not with the audience here. The more so there was. Well, okay, you have the floor. In your comments, you said that something you compared with the Soviet Union times, but you do not behave correctly yourselves. You were talking about the office officials and the bodies of the state power. You should not, let's say, agitate for the, let's say, make us vote for the public cause. Many of them actively use the most advanced information technologies in their process. But the question is reasonability or the expediency of those changes, or specifically we're talking about this draft law, this law. Who actually prohibits to use the cloud technologies today? Nobody, nothing. The structure now, of the structure now. Creation of the national data center will be much easier, much simpler than to obtain the international certificate. Much cheaper. And I can tell you, much easier and simple and much simpler, because our normative requirements are much simpler as compared to the international standards. Regarding the international standards, why this confusion?
The law on information defines that the information is divided to open and restricted access. Restricted access, it's confidential, secret, commercial, state, banking, so on. Why are they mixing it up? I don't know. All the information is protected. It's open, talking about access. What you write that it's encrypted, there's no obligation to encrypt open information, even confident is not encrypted. What's the problem? I don't see it. Talking about implementation of new technologies, we had the head of the state agency on e-governance. This agency is responsible for introducing the national program on informatization. But what is the scheme of that law? That I have a technical assignment and the agency can recommend use of this or that technology. Without their approval, the Treasury will not provide any funding. What's the problem? Why do we need these changes to the law? In some items, in some issues, they make work more complicated for business, for example. You're talking about commercial secret, and for commercial secret you need to get a certificate of the data center. On your changes, as to the ownership of the system, I don't understand why using cloud technology I have to share the ownership with the service provider. But this is one opinion, there are other opinions. When you say that all the state bodies can use the cloud, that is not really so. For example, you say that now you can use the cloud technology, some private company in Ukraine can build. It is not so in the law. The law on personal data says if there is information on physical persons, it says that the state body of the company which will process. Now the norm is that the person that processes, such person could be only the state body. The Nova cannot come and do. Even storing is considered to be processing. That is first thing. To say that there are no obstacles to use clouds is wrong. Otherwise there will be no sense to write the draft. But if you look at the law on information protection in IT systems, you will see that in reality, what in practice no one does, this is not state bodies. That's the practice, but крысы, а то мыши. But we need to look more carefully at all these issues. This norm is ignored in practice, and as to the protection of cryptographic information, there's no such requirement at the level of the law. But if we do have requirement to transfer from system to system, and if you get the TOR, then when the TOR is approved, they will refer to their order which says that they have to use cryptographical security measures which are built on national elliptic curves. So we need to change. Не, ну просто это ж, оно не имеет никакого смысла. I give you as an example the law on personal data, that is the law. So, I believe you can continue this discussion for a long time, but we need legislation, not just regulatory documents. We need to explain what opportunities are. If you have any questions or comments, you're welcome. Не, гаплык вообще полный. Полный гаплык.
Это
Полный.
кошмар. Это еще хуже, чем то, что там было.
А там было еще тоже такое же.
Там было много похоже, но это намного хуже.
Active Cloud, second time. Thank you for raising the issue of clouds. The future's there. That is an important, brave step. My colleague talked about the law, but maybe the main issue, which is of interest for us, who at the state level is responsible for development of not just cloud technologies, because we understand that G-Cloud, e-government, it's all mixed up. But who will be developing G-Cloud? Based on the experience of the countries that Dmitry mentioned, Great Britain, Japan, who at the level of the state is responsible for the project, and who can we talk to? We're interested in PPP, and because we have great experience and understanding that what exists for Moldova and Belarus, we can really attract investments to the country.
Thank you for your question, but indeed, I'm just going to address our legislation regarding what are the authorities which public sectors or public agencies who are responsible for the pursuance of the policy. The Agency for E-Government, and we read the regulations that the Communications Committee has also been involved that the presidential administration is in these issues coordinator. The president has the legislative initiative, which we make use of. Also, we are working within the framework of the reforms, including the electronic government and the list of tasks. Also, you mentioned the G-Cloud and cloud technologies. Maybe your question a bit anticipates the situation or ahead of the situation, because this is the very first step, which is part not only of the coalition agreement by the Presidential Program 2020, in other words, it's planned. So if you're interested how the development of G-Cloud will take place, this will be decided in the nearest future. And the respective bodies and the presidential administration, fortunately, Ms. Minich from the Department of the Minister of Economic Development and Trade, she couldn't make it, but they are working on that, and we are talking about some kind of synergy between different public bodies and agencies, but the state program, which is going to be adopted by the parliament from point of view of the development of electronic government, etc., which is fixed in the political documents, actually. Nobody has to go there because this draft law is called the preparation of the draft law. We were talking about this procedure or process in which is responsible for which is the presidential administration which initiated this draft law. When we finish this job, we are going to start our work on other laws. Maybe by that day, we are going to get better understand what is what, and maybe this process actually is developing in, you are eyewitness of this development actually, of this process. Thanks a lot. I believe that perhaps most important to raise this issue and to understand where we have a common interest, or where we have the problem, and to start to discuss it not in the air, but based on the real document. Again, I would like to draw your attention by the same address of your electronic email, the Central of Promotion of Investment and Trade. We are expecting from you the written comments regarding the discussion of this draft law, and we are absolutely calmly and very nicely committed to paper and send it to the developers, and we undertake the commitment to bring the information about their input to you, or feedback to you. But as far as I understand, there is the common wish and desire and the interest to launch cloud technologies in our country. Thanks a lot to everybody.